When most people think of sushi, they think of Japan. They think of master chefs, gleaming knives, carefully prepared seafood, and elegant restaurants. What few realize is that sushi did not begin as cuisine. It began as a survival strategy. Its story stretches back more than 2,000 years, across multiple civilizations, climates, and cultures. It begins not in modern Tokyo, but among ancient fishing communities struggling to preserve food in a world without refrigeration. Over time, what started as a practical solution to spoilage evolved into a sophisticated culinary tradition. Along the way, it crossed borders, adapted to new environments, survived wars, weathered disasters, and transformed itself repeatedly. This is not simply the story of a food. It is the story of how humans respond to necessity. Again and again throughout history, survival problems have produced innovations that later become traditions. Bread began as grain preservation. Cheese began as milk preservation. Wine began as fruit preservation. Sushi belongs to the same family. Its modern form hides its origins so effectively that most people would barely recognize its earliest ancestor. To understand sushi, we must travel backward through time, peeling away centuries of refinement until we reach the original problem that made it necessary. And like many great inventions, the story begins with a question: how do you keep food from rotting? Today, sushi exists almost everywhere. It appears in luxury restaurants and convenience stores. It is served in airports, supermarkets, hotels, homes, and street markets. Millions of people who have never visited Japan eat sushi regularly. In economic terms, sushi has become a global industry worth billions of dollars. In cultural terms, it has become one of Japan's most successful exports. Yet the modern success of sushi creates a strange illusion. The more familiar sushi becomes, the less visible its history becomes. Most people know how to eat sushi. Far fewer know why it exists. Even fewer know that its earliest ancestor may have emerged thousands of kilometers from modern Japan. Food has a unique ability to conceal history. When we see a finished dish, we rarely see the climate, geography, technology, trade routes, migrations, and historical accidents that produced it. Yet all of those forces are embedded within every bite. Sushi is especially fascinating because its evolution can be traced across many centuries. Unlike foods whose origins remain obscure, sushi allows us to observe civilization at work. We can watch preservation become cuisine. We can watch necessity become culture. We can watch technology become identity. That transformation is why sushi matters, not merely as food, but as a historical artifact that continues to live and evolve. Ask 100 people where sushi came from and most will answer the same way: Japan. That answer is both correct and incomplete. Japan unquestionably created modern sushi. Nigiri sushi, makizushi, and the forms recognized around the world today are products of Japanese culinary evolution. But if we trace the lineage backward, the story becomes more complicated. Modern sushi resembles a tree. Japan created the branches. But the roots extend much deeper. Those roots appear to lie among ancient fish preservation traditions that developed across mainland Southeast Asia before spreading into southern China and eventually reaching Japan. This distinction matters because invention is rarely a single moment. Most important cultural innovations emerge through accumulation. Ideas evolve. Practices migrate. Technologies adapt. The deeper we investigate sushi's history, the less it resembles a single invention and the more it resembles a long conversation between civilizations. Long before sushi existed, humanity faced a recurring paradox. Success could create failure. Imagine a fishing community living along a great river system. One morning, the fishermen return with an extraordinary catch. Nets are overflowing. Families celebrate. For a brief moment, abundance has arrived. But abundance carries a hidden threat. Without refrigeration, Fish begins deteriorating almost immediately. Within hours, quality declines. Within days, much of the catch may become inedible. The larger the catch, the greater the challenge. This was not merely an inconvenience. It was a matter of survival. For ancient communities, food security was rarely about producing enough food. Often, it was about keeping food long enough to consume it. The problem was particularly acute in tropical environments. Heat, humidity, insects, and microorganisms worked continuously against preservation. Every civilization faced this challenge. Some responded with drying, others with smoking, others with salting, still others with fermentation. Again and again throughout human history, necessity forced innovation. The origins of sushi belong to this broader story. Its ancestors were not created by chefs seeking elegance or diners seeking pleasure. They were created by ordinary people confronting an ancient question. How can today's abundance become tomorrow's food? That question would eventually transform food history. But before we can understand the solution, we must understand the environment that made the solution possible. Civilizations are shaped by geography. Food traditions are shaped by geography even more. The likely birthplace of sushi's earliest ancestor was not a kingdom, empire, or city. It was an ecosystem. Across mainland Southeast Asia, great rivers such as the Mekong sustained dense populations of fishing and farming communities. The rivers provided enormous quantities of freshwater fish. The floodplains supported rice cultivation. Together they created one of the most productive food environments on Earth. Yet this abundance created a challenge. Fish arrived in large quantities during seasonal cycles. Rice arrived in large quantities during harvest cycles. Both resources needed management. Fish spoiled quickly. Rice did not. Over generations, people discovered that these two resources could solve each other's problems. Rice could help preserve fish. Fish could provide protein long after the fishing season ended. What emerged was more than a recipe. It was a technology. The remarkable thing about this invention is that it required no scientific understanding of microorganisms. Ancient people did not know about lactic acid bacteria. They did not know about pH levels. They did not know about microbial ecosystems. Yet through observation and experimentation, they learned how to create conditions that favored preservation. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout history. Humans often discover solutions long before they understand why those solutions work. The geography of the Mekong Basin did not merely provide ingredients. It provided the environmental pressures that made innovation necessary. And from that innovation would emerge one of the most influential food lineages in human history. If a modern sushi chef could travel back in time and see the earliest ancestor of sushi, they might struggle to recognize it. There were no sushi rolls, no nigiri, no sashimi, no elegant presentations. Instead, they would find something much more practical. Along river systems across mainland Southeast Asia, fishing communities developed a preservation method that combined three ingredients: fish, salt, rice. The process began by cleaning and salting freshly caught fish. The fish was then packed tightly into cooked rice and sealed inside containers. Time did the rest. As the rice fermented, beneficial microorganisms created an acidic environment that slowed spoilage. The result was preserved fish that could remain edible for extended periods. To modern eyes, this may seem surprisingly sophisticated. Yet it emerged long before anyone understood bacteria, fermentation science, or microbiology. Ancient people learned through observation. They knew what worked. They did not necessarily know why. This is one of the great patterns of human innovation. Practical knowledge often arrives centuries before scientific explanation. The original purpose was never flavor. The original purpose was survival. But history contains a fascinating irony. Many of humanity's most beloved foods began as solutions to problems. Cheese solved milk spoilage. Wine solved fruit spoilage. Kimchi solved winter scarcity. And sushi's ancestor solved fish spoilage. What people later learned was that preservation sometimes created flavors they enjoyed. A technology slowly became a taste. And a taste would eventually become a tradition. One of the most remarkable aspects of sushi's ancestor is that it worked. And it worked exceptionally well. Modern science explains the process through microbiology. Ancient people explained it through experience. Both perspectives lead to the same result. When salted fish was packed into cooked rice, microorganisms naturally present in the environment began consuming carbohydrates within the rice. As they did so, they produced acids. These acids lowered the pH of the environment. Spoilage organisms struggled to survive. The fish remained edible. Today we describe this as lactic acid fermentation. Ancient communities simply recognized that the method consistently preserved food. The process could take weeks or months. In some forms, even longer. Patience became part of the technology. The fermentation vessel effectively became a storage system, allowing communities to bridge periods of scarcity. This achievement should not be underestimated. For much of history, the difference between survival and hardship often depended on preservation. A successful preservation technology increased resilience. It reduced vulnerability. It created food security. In this sense, the ancestor of sushi belongs to the same historical category as granaries, salt production, and later canned food. All were attempts to solve the same fundamental problem. How do we overcome time? Food naturally deteriorates. Civilizations continuously invent ways to delay that deterioration. The ancestor of sushi was one of humanity's most successful early answers. Modern sushi is associated with freshness. Ancient sushi was associated with preservation. That difference changed everything. The earliest forms likely possessed strong fermented aromas, pronounced acidity, and intense savory characteristics. To many modern diners, the smell alone might be surprising. The experience would probably resemble certain fermented fish products still consumed across Southeast Asia today, such as Thai cuisine pla ra, Lao cuisine pa durek, or Vietnamese cuisine mum ka. These foods remain highly valued by those familiar with them. Yet first-time visitors often find them challenging. This illustrates an important principle in food history. Taste is cultural. What one society considers delicious, another may consider strange. The original consumers of fish rice preservation were not seeking elegance. They were seeking reliability. Flavor was secondary. Over time, however, repeated exposure changed preferences. People began appreciating aspects of the fermentation itself. This marks a profound shift. The preservation technology was no longer merely tolerated. It was enjoyed. That transformation set the stage for everything that followed. Unlike kings, wars, and empires, ordinary meals rarely leave detailed records. Food historians must therefore work like detectives. They assemble clues from multiple sources: ancient texts, archaeological remains, linguistic evidence, living culinary traditions. Together these fragments reveal a compelling picture. Evidence suggests fish rice preservation existed across mainland Southeast Asia long before clear Japanese records appear. By the Han Dynasty, related traditions were known in southern China. By the 8th century, forms of preserved fish rice preparations were documented in Japan. The evidence does not point to a single inventor. Instead, it points to gradual evolution across generations and regions. These foods remind us that the ancestor of sushi was never exclusively Japanese. It belonged to a broader preservation tradition that stretched across multiple cultures. The story becomes less about invention and more about inheritance. Ideas rarely stay where they originate. Successful ideas travel. The fish rice preservation technique appears to have moved gradually through networks of migration, trade, and cultural contact. From mainland Southeast Asia, related traditions spread into southern China. From there, versions eventually reached Japan. This journey occurred over centuries rather than decades. No single caravan carried sushi. No single explorer introduced it. Instead, countless interactions accumulated over generations. Each community modified what it inherited. Each adaptation reflected local conditions. One of the most remarkable aspects of this story is that the ancestral tradition never vanished entirely. Its descendants still exist today. In Japan, perhaps the most famous example is funazushi. Often regarded as one of the closest living relatives of ancient narazushi, it preserves elements of the older fermentation tradition. Across mainland Southeast Asia, related foods remain part of everyday life. These include Thai cuisine pla som and pla ra, Lao cuisine pa darek, and Vietnamese cuisine mum ka. To taste these foods today is to encounter echoes of an ancient world. A world where survival, preservation, and ingenuity shaped daily life. By the time the preservation method reached Japan, it was already part of a much broader regional tradition. What happened next would change that story forever. Because Japan would not merely preserve the tradition. Japan would transform it. By the early medieval period, the fish rice preservation method had already spread across parts of East Asia. Japan did not invent the technique. It inherited it. At first, the method served the same practical purpose it had elsewhere. Fish spoiled quickly. Fermentation preserved it. Rice acted as the preserving medium. The technique arrived as a solution to a common problem. But in Japan, something unexpected began to happen. Rather than simply preserving the tradition, Japanese society gradually began adapting it. Over the centuries, what had been inherited would be refined. What had been practical would become desirable. And what began as a preservation technology would ultimately become one of the world's most celebrated cuisines. Japan inherited a preservation technology. While other civilizations gradually pursued different culinary directions, Japan continued refining fish rice preservation. What it created was something entirely different. Several factors encouraged this transformation. Japan's geography made seafood essential. As an island nation, fish occupied a central place in daily life. Preserving fish remained important for centuries. This ensured the ancestral technique remained relevant. Japanese society continued finding value in the ancestral preservation method, allowing it to evolve rather than disappear. But relevance alone does not explain sushi. The deeper story concerns taste. At some point, people began appreciating not only the preserved fish but also aspects of the fermentation itself. The sourness, the complexity, the character created by time. This was a crucial moment. The preservation method ceased being merely practical. It became desirable. Over time, people began eating the fermented rice as well as the fish. Fermentation periods gradually shortened. The emphasis slowly shifted from preservation toward culinary enjoyment. From that moment onward, Japan began a centuries-long process of refinement. What began as a preservation technology gradually became a cultural food tradition. And over many generations, that refinement would ultimately transform an ancient preservation technology into one of the world's most celebrated cuisines. China's story is not one of failure. It is a story of redirection. Rather than continuing to refine fish rice preservation, China gradually invested more heavily in other culinary traditions, including hot cooking, wok techniques, steaming, noodles, buns, dumplings, and soy-based preservation. As Chinese civilization expanded, urbanized, and diversified, its culinary culture became increasingly sophisticated. By the Song dynasty, Chinese cities contained some of the world's most advanced food cultures. Cooks mastered stir-frying, steaming, braising, roasting, noodle production, dumpling making, soy fermentation. China developed an extraordinary range of culinary technologies. Many solved the same problems that fish rice preservation once addressed. Need portable food. China had baodizi. Need preserved food. China had pickling, drying, smoking, salting, and fermented sauces. Need wrapped meals. China had spring rolls, dumplings, and zongdizi. As these alternatives flourished, fish rice preservation became less central. Another factor was cultural preference. Chinese cuisine increasingly emphasized food served hot and freshly prepared. The ideal meal became a collection of cooked dishes shared among diners. Cold rice wrapped around fillings never became culturally dominant. Instead, those alternative traditions increasingly became the foundation of Chinese cuisine. Rice was meant to accompany dishes, not become the dish itself. This distinction seems subtle. Historically, it was profound. China did not lose the ancestral tradition. It simply found other paths that better suited its evolving civilization. Faced with the same preservation challenge, China chose a different culinary path. Korea's relationship to sushi is often misunderstood. The question is frequently framed as, did Korea copy Japan? History suggests a more nuanced answer. Korea's story represents a third path. Like China and Japan, Korea inherited access to many of the same ingredients, preservation knowledge, and regional influences. Yet it arrived at a distinctly different culinary outcome. Rather than simply preserving or refining the ancestral tradition, Korea combined its own long-established food culture with selected ideas borrowed from its neighbors. Long before modern gimbap existed, Korea possessed rich traditions of wrapping foods. Korea maintained those traditions while later adapting elements of Japanese rolling techniques introduced during the colonial period. Rice, vegetables, and meats were commonly wrapped in leaves or seaweed. The broader concept of wrapping food was deeply Korean. During the Japanese colonial period, Koreans encountered the rolled form of makizushi and the bamboo rolling mat used to create it. The technique proved useful, but the resulting dish evolved in a distinctly Korean direction. Vinegar gave way to sesame oil. Raw fish largely disappeared. Cooked ingredients became dominant. The flavor profile shifted entirely. The result was not sushi. The result was gimbap. This pattern appears throughout cultural history. Borrowed forms often become vehicles for local creativity. The final product reflects the receiving culture as much as the source. Gimbap therefore represents both continuity and adaptation. Its form reflects historical interaction. Its identity reflects Korea. The history of sushi is ultimately not about sushi. It is about choice. Three civilizations inherited access to similar resources: rice, fish, preservation techniques, regional exchange networks. Yet each produced a different answer. Why? The answer lies in the interaction of environment and culture. Civilizations do not merely inherit technologies. They decide which technologies deserve further investment. Every society faces countless possibilities. Only some are pursued. Others are abandoned. China invested in hot cooking, wok culture, noodles, buns, and other culinary traditions. Japan continued refining fish rice preservation until it became sushi. Korea combined its own wrapping traditions with later influences to create gimbap. None of these outcomes were inevitable. Neither path was superior. Each reflected a different answer to the same fundamental challenges. Each emerged from countless decisions accumulated across centuries. Food, therefore, becomes more than nourishment. It becomes evidence. Evidence of priorities. Evidence of geography. Evidence of cultural values. Evidence of history itself. The deeper lesson is that civilizations do not simply inherit technologies. They reinterpret them. The ancestral preservation method was one idea. China, Japan, and Korea each answered that idea differently. From those different answers emerged three distinct culinary worlds. Together, they represent one of history's great culinary divergences. Among the three civilizations, Japan took the inherited preservation method in a remarkable new direction. Let us now return to Japan. It was here that the inherited preservation method would undergo its most remarkable transformation. The history of sushi is therefore best understood not as a single invention, but as a long process of evolution. Its earliest ancestor emerged as a preservation technology. Fish was packed in rice. The rice fermented. The fish survived. That was the entire objective. Yet over centuries, people began modifying the process. This long refinement began because Japanese society continued seeing value in the preservation method rather than abandoning it. What followed was not a single invention, but a succession of small innovations accumulated across many generations. What began as preservation slowly became cuisine. Historians generally describe the evolution in several major stages. Stage 1. Ancient fish rice preservation. Freshwater fish preserved in fermented rice. Rice largely discarded. Purpose: survival. Stage 2. Nare-sushi. Preservation becomes increasingly refined. Fish remains central. Fermentation remains lengthy. Purpose: preservation with growing appreciation for flavor. Stage 3. Nare-sushi. Shorter fermentation periods. Fish and rice increasingly consumed together. Purpose: preservation and taste. Stage 4. Hayasushi. Fermentation dramatically shortened. Purpose shifts toward culinary enjoyment. Stage 5. Nigiri and modern sushi. Vinegar replaces fermentation. Preparation measured in minutes rather than months. Purpose becomes cuisine. The remarkable thing is that each stage solved the same problem differently. The underlying idea remained. The implementation evolved. This evolutionary journey would eventually produce one of the world's most recognizable foods. For much of sushi's early history, rice played a surprisingly humble role. It was a preservation medium, not a food. Its purpose was to create conditions that allowed fish to survive. Once preservation was complete, the rice had often become sour, mushy, and heavily altered by fermentation. In many cases, it was discarded. From a modern perspective, this seems astonishing. After all, rice is now inseparable from sushi. Yet for centuries it was disposable. As Japan's long refinement continued, one of the most important changes involved the rice itself. At some point during Japan's long refinement of the preservation tradition, attitudes began changing. People discovered they enjoyed aspects of the fermented rice itself. The rice was no longer merely functional. It contributed flavor. It contributed texture. It contributed identity. The relationship between fish and rice began shifting. What had once been a tool became a partner. This change seems small. Historically, it was revolutionary. Many of history's greatest innovations occur when people re-evaluate something previously regarded as secondary. The rice's promotion from preservation technology to edible component fundamentally altered sushi's future. From this point forward, Sushi became increasingly concerned with the experience of eating rather than simply the preservation of food. A new direction had emerged. But the rice was only one milestone in a much longer process. Over the centuries, fermentation periods gradually shortened. Preparation methods became more deliberate. The balance between fish and rice became more refined. What mattered was no longer only whether the fish could be preserved, but whether the final result was pleasing to eat. Sushi was slowly moving from storage method to culinary craft. For centuries, fermentation had been both sushi's greatest strength and greatest limitation. It preserved food. But it required time. Sometimes weeks. Sometimes months. Sometimes longer. This was the culmination of the centuries-long refinement that had begun with ancient fish preservation. As Japanese society became increasingly sophisticated and urbanized, demand grew for foods that could be prepared more quickly. The answer emerged in a simple ingredient: vinegar. Rice vinegar could reproduce much of the desirable sourness associated with fermentation. Instead of waiting months, cooks could achieve similar flavor profiles almost immediately. The implications were enormous. Fermentation was no longer necessary. The flavor survived. The waiting disappeared. This innovation represents one of the great moments in culinary history. A technology that once required months could now be reproduced in minutes. The old preservation logic was fading. A new culinary logic was taking its place. The refinements accumulated over many centuries now encountered a new force, one of the world's fastest-growing cities. By the early 19th century, Edo, modern Tokyo, was one of the largest cities on Earth. Its population exceeded 1 million. Merchants, laborers, craftsmen, samurai, all required food. And increasingly they required it quickly. Urbanization changes cuisine. Large cities reward convenience. Speed becomes valuable. Portability becomes valuable. Consistency becomes valuable. The conditions that once favored preservation were now giving way to conditions that favored efficiency. Sushi adapted. The food that had once been measured in months now began being measured in minutes. This was not merely culinary evolution. It was economic evolution. The city was reshaping the food. And the food was reshaping itself to serve the city. Around 1824, a chef named Haniya Yohei helped popularize a revolutionary idea. Instead of preserving fish for months, why not serve fresh fish immediately? Using vinegared rice, fresh seafood, and rapid preparation, he created a form of sushi that would have astonished earlier generations. It was fast, portable, convenient, delicious. Most importantly, it fit the needs of Edo. What had begun centuries earlier as a preservation technology had become urban fast food. Ironically, modern sushi's origins are closer to a street food stall than to a luxury restaurant. Only later would sushi acquire its reputation for refinement and artistry. The transformation was complete. The ancient preservation technology had become a cuisine. Yet the story was far from over. From this point onward, sushi would be shaped not only by chefs, but also by forces far beyond the kitchen. History would intervene in many forms. Disasters, wars, industrialization, trade, technology. Each would reshape sushi in ways no chef could have anticipated. The next phase of the story explores how history itself changed the food. On September 1, 1923, One of the most destructive disasters in Japanese history struck Tokyo and surrounding regions. The Great Kanto earthquake devastated the capital. Entire neighborhoods disappeared. Businesses collapsed. Lives were uprooted. Among those affected were sushi chefs. Many suddenly found themselves without customers, premises, or livelihoods. To survive, they relocated. Some moved to other cities. Others moved to entirely different regions. History does not change only nations. Sometimes it changes food as well. Wherever they went, they carried Edo-style sushi and the techniques they had mastered. This migration produced an unexpected consequence. Tokyo-style sushi spread throughout Japan. Before the earthquake, many regions maintained their own local traditions. After the earthquake, Edo-style sushi became increasingly familiar nationwide. A natural disaster had unintentionally accelerated the nationwide spread of Edo-style sushi. The event serves as a reminder that food history is often shaped by forces that have nothing to do with food itself. World War II created immense pressure on Japanese society. Food shortages became widespread. Rice became precious. Government controls expanded. The sushi industry faced an existential threat. Traditional food businesses struggled to survive under rationing. In response, sushi vendors developed creative adaptations. One of the most important involved rice allocation. Customers could bring their government-issued rice ration to sushi establishments. The establishment would then transform that rice into sushi. This arrangement allowed businesses to continue operating despite severe restrictions. The consequences were unexpected. Portion sizes shrank. Efficiency improved. Standardization increased. Many historians believe that the smaller, bite-sized proportions familiar today were reinforced during this period. Necessity once again drove adaptation. Just as preservation needs had created sushi's ancestor centuries earlier, wartime scarcity now reshaped its modern form. History was once again leaving its mark on food. Trade introduced sushi to the world. Technology allowed it to flourish. The ancestor of sushi had emerged because fresh fish spoiled quickly. For more than 2,000 years, preservation was the central challenge. Modern technology changed that reality. Steamships connected distant ports. Railways moved seafood rapidly inland. Mechanical refrigeration and cold storage preserved freshness. Modern fishing expanded the supply of high-quality seafood. Refrigerated transport and global logistics completed the cold chain. Fresh seafood could now travel thousands of kilometers while maintaining its quality. The technological need for preservation was gradually disappearing. Yet rather than becoming obsolete, sushi adapted once again. Restaurants gained access to seafood from around the world. Quality became more consistent. Seasonal limitations diminished. Global distribution became routine. Technology did something remarkable. It freed sushi from the geographical and logistical constraints that had shaped its entire history. One of history's great ironies had come full circle. A cuisine born from the need to preserve fish had become one of the world's most technologically dependent fresh foods. The preservation technology had evolved into a cuisine. The cuisine had evolved into a global industry. For most of its history, sushi remained primarily a Japanese food. That began changing as Japan became increasingly connected to the wider world. Trade expanded. Steamships shortened journeys. Railways connected ports and cities. Migration carried not only people, but also knowledge, traditions, and recipes. As Japanese communities established themselves overseas, sushi traveled with them. At first, it remained largely within expatriate communities. Gradually, curious local diners embraced it. Adaptation soon followed. California rolls. Fusion sushi. Regional ingredients. Local tastes reshaped an ancient tradition. This process was remarkably familiar. Centuries earlier, fish rice preservation had traveled across East Asia and evolved differently in each society. Now sushi itself was beginning another journey. Ideas moved. Cultures adapted. New forms emerged. Sushi had become part of a global conversation. Together, these forces transformed sushi from a Japanese urban food into a global cultural icon. Globalization rarely spreads foods unchanged. Instead, foods adapt to new environments. Sushi is one of history's clearest examples. As Japanese communities settled abroad, they introduced sushi to new audiences. Gradually, curious local diners embraced it. Restaurants multiplied, and sushi gradually became popular far beyond Japanese communities. But those audiences had different tastes, different ingredients, different expectations. Adaptation followed. Fusion sushi emerged. The California roll emerged partly because many American diners were initially uncomfortable with visible seaweed and raw fish. Avocado entered the sushi world. Cream cheese appeared. Local seafood, vegetables, and seasonings increasingly reflected regional tastes. The result was not one global sushi, but many regional expressions of the same tradition. Some traditionalists criticized these innovations. Others celebrated them. Both responses reflect a deeper question. Does adaptation strengthen a tradition or weaken it? History suggests that adaptation is often what allows traditions to survive. The ancestor of sushi survived because it adapted repeatedly. As sushi spread across the world, serving millions of people consistently would require more than cultural adaptation. It would require an entirely new industry. Cultural adaptation helped sushi spread around the world. Industrial innovation made it possible to serve that world. Modern sushi is no longer simply a cuisine. It is also a global industry. Every day, millions of pieces of sushi are produced, transported, and served around the world. Making that possible requires far more than skilled chefs. Modern aquaculture supplies a reliable source of seafood. Food safety standards and quality control protect consumers. Conveyor belt restaurants make sushi accessible to millions. Supermarkets bring sushi into everyday shopping. Automation improves consistency, speed, and efficiency. Global supply chains coordinate fishing, processing, refrigeration, transport, and distribution across continents. Behind every piece of sushi lies an immense network of people, technology, and logistics working together. The remarkable journey that began as a simple method of preserving fish has become one of the world's most sophisticated food industries. If an ancient fish preservation specialist from the Mekong Basin walked into a modern sushi restaurant, what would they recognize? The answer is surprising. They would recognize the relationship between fish and rice. They would recognize the importance of preservation and flavor. They would recognize the underlying idea. But almost everything else would seem unfamiliar. The original ancestor of sushi was slow, fermented, primarily preservation-focused, are often consumed months after preparation. Modern sushi is fast, fresh, culinary-focused, consumed almost immediately. Ancient sushi solved a storage problem. Modern sushi solves a dining experience. The transformation reveals an important principle. Technologies often evolve so dramatically that their descendants become almost unrecognizable. Consider the relationship between our ancient carts and modern automobiles, our early telegraphs and smartphones, our ancient fish rice preservation and modern sushi. The lineage remains. The implementation changes. What survived was not the exact recipe. It was the underlying idea. The relationship between fish, rice, preservation, and flavor. People love authentic food. They also argue endlessly about what authenticity means. Consider sushi. Some insist true sushi must resemble traditional Japanese forms. Others accept global adaptations. Who is correct? The historical answer is uncomfortable for both sides. Sushi has never stopped changing. Ancient fermented fish preservation was authentic. Nare-zushi was authentic. Haya-zushi was authentic. Edo period nigiri was authentic. Modern sushi is authentic. Each was authentic to its own time. What survived was never the exact recipe. It was the underlying idea. The relationship between fish, rice, preservation, and flavor. Authenticity, therefore, may be less about preserving a fixed recipe and more about maintaining a meaningful connection to a tradition's evolution. This perspective changes the conversation. Instead of asking, "Is this authentic?" we might ask, "How does this fit into the ongoing history of the food?" The answer is often far more interesting. Historical myths often emerge because simple stories are easier to remember than complicated ones. Japan invented sushi. Simple. Memorable. Incomplete. The real story involves multiple regions, centuries of evolution, and repeated adaptation. Similarly, many people assume sushi has always involved fresh raw fish. In reality, the oldest forms focused on preservation. The fish was not fresh. The preservation process was the point. Understanding these myths does not diminish sushi. Quite the opposite. The real history is richer, deeper, and more fascinating than the simplified version. The true story reveals how ideas travel, cultures interact, and traditions evolve. At first glance, sushi appears remarkably simple. Rice, fish, a few carefully chosen accompaniments. Yet behind that simplicity lies a carefully balanced combination of flavors and sensations. The fish contributes umami and richness. The vinegared rice adds gentle acidity and subtle sweetness. Soy sauce deepens savory flavor. Wasabi provides aroma, heat, and contrast. Different textures, soft fish, firm rice, crisp seaweed, keep every bite interesting. Even temperature matters. Cool fish resting on slightly warm rice creates a more satisfying experience. None of these elements dominates the others. Instead, each balances the rest. The secret of sushi does not lie in any single ingredient. It lies in how those ingredients work together. Individually, they are ordinary. Combined, they create an experience greater than the sum of their parts. Many of history's greatest innovations emerge not from inventing entirely new things, but from combining familiar things in better ways. Sushi reminds us that extraordinary results often come not from complexity, but from thoughtful composition. Over the centuries, something remarkable happened. A technology for preserving fish became far more than a way to survive. It became something people shared. Families gathered around it. Friends celebrated with it. Guests were welcomed through it. Craftsmen devoted years to mastering it. Each generation added its own care, refinement, and tradition. What began as preservation gradually became hospitality. What began as necessity became celebration. What began as technique became craftsmanship. And what began as a practical solution became part of Japan's cultural identity. This transformation reveals something deeply human. We rarely stop at solving problems. We turn solutions into traditions. We turn traditions into culture. And through culture, we create experiences that bring people together. In the end, sushi became more than just food. It became a shared human experience. Modern people often begin food history with flavor. Ancient people began with survival. Many of the world's most beloved foods began not as luxuries, but as solutions. Cheese emerged because milk spoiled. Wine emerged because fruit spoiled. Kimchi emerged because winters were harsh. Cured meats emerged because fresh meat deteriorated. Bread emerged because grains needed storage. The ancestor of sushi belongs to this remarkable family. Again and again, humanity confronted the same question. How do we preserve today's abundance for tomorrow? When harvests were good, people needed ways to extend their value. When catches were large, people needed ways to prevent waste. The answer was adaptation. Human beings rarely invent foods in isolation from their environment. Instead, food emerges from the interaction of geography, climate, resources, technology, culture. The Mekong Basin created conditions favorable for fish rice preservation. Cold northern climates encouraged other preservation methods. Pastoral societies developed dairy traditions. Agricultural societies developed grain traditions. Every cuisine reflects its environment. The original purpose of many of these foods was not delight. It was resilience. This realization changes how we view food. What appears to be cuisine is often hidden technology. What appears to be culture is often accumulated problem-solving. Food becomes a record of human ingenuity. Every preserved food tells a story of people refusing to surrender to time. Each cuisine records how a society learned to live within its world. Sushi is not unique. Again and again throughout history, humanity has followed the same pattern. Cheese began as a way to preserve milk. Wine began as a way to preserve fruit. Kimchi helped communities survive long winters. Canned food was developed to supply armies over long campaigns. Each began as a practical solution to an immediate problem. But the story never ended there. People became familiar with these foods. Flavors once accepted out of necessity gradually became enjoyable. Traditions formed. Cultural meanings accumulated. What began as a solution became a tradition. The tradition became identity. The identity became heritage. Eventually, the original problem often disappeared. Yet the food remained. Modern sushi survives even though refrigeration has largely solved the preservation challenge that created its ancestor. The original necessity faded. The cultural meaning endured. This may be one of the defining characteristics of civilization itself. Humans transform solutions into traditions, traditions into culture, and culture into stories that are passed from one generation to the next. Modern people often begin food history with flavor. Ancient people began with survival. That simple shift in perspective changes everything. The ancestor of sushi emerged because fish spoiled. Throughout history, innovation rarely emerges because life is easy. Innovation emerges because life is difficult. People face limitations. Resources are scarce. Food spoils. Winters arrive. Supply chains fail. Wars disrupt society. And in response, people invent. Kimchi emerged because winters were long. Canned food emerged because armies needed provisions. Again and again, necessity becomes the mother of invention. But there is a second stage. The solution acquires meaning. People begin valuing the flavors, rituals, and experiences created by the solution. What began as survival becomes culture. What began as technology becomes identity. This transformation may be one of humanity's most remarkable abilities. We do not merely solve problems. We create meaning from the solutions. Food therefore reveals something profound about civilization. Civilization is not simply the accumulation of technologies. It is the accumulation of meanings attached to those technologies. The story began with a problem. Fish spoiled. Ancient communities living along river systems needed a way to preserve abundance. From that necessity emerged a preservation technology: fish, rice, salt, thyme. The technique spread. It evolved. It crossed cultures. China helped carry the ancestral tradition but increasingly chose different culinary paths. Japan preserved and refined it. Korea adapted related influences into something new. Over centuries, preservation became flavor. Flavor became cuisine. Cuisine became identity. Cities accelerated change. Vinegar replaced fermentation. Edo transformed sushi into fast food. Earthquakes spread it across Japan. Wars reshaped portions. Technology liberated it from ancient constraints. Trade carried it around the world. Today, millions of people consume sushi without realizing they are participating in a story more than 2,000 years old. Yet perhaps the most important lesson is not about sushi. It is about humanity. Again and again, people confront limitations. Again and again, they adapt. Again and again, solutions evolve into traditions. The history of sushi follows a universal pattern. Necessity leads to preservation. Preservation invites adaptation. Adaptation drives refinement. Refinement creates cuisine. Cuisine becomes culture. Culture shapes identity. And, over time, identity can become a global icon. That journey is not unique to sushi. It is one of the defining patterns of civilization itself. And that is why the history of a simple fish and rice preservation technique ultimately becomes a story about all of us.